fortunate for is we have two outstanding people, in my judgment, who are leading the city and the school district right now. And you're going to be able to listen to both of them speak. And Brian, I've worked with city managers since Peter Harvey, and I do have a favorite, and you just heard her. I'm very impressed with Martha. I'd also like to just make a case once again for your connection with each other. I think it's so important that you reach out and connect with your partners and connect with the people in your group discussions. Because today we're going to do 2 group discussions, and we've assigned you to a group. We have facilitators for most of the sessions, and facilitators' role is just to keep things moving and let people talk with each other. And we have one group that doesn't have a facilitator today, and you can decide who you want to help move along the process. So, and in that regard, I'm just going to say something about Malcolm Mathis. He signed his list there of who he is as retired, and I want to use him as an example of an amazing leader in our community who has done tremendous work in volunteer avenues. He's received the 2 highest honors our community already gives, and that's the Community Leader of the Year Award as well as the Lifetime Achievement Award. He's just kind of a modest guy. And so he's a great facilitative leader. He's a great connector, and he's for real. And if you get a chance to meet him, just like anybody else here, we want you to connect and find out something about the other people so you can continue to build relationships. So anyway, kudos to Martha. She did a good job. So let's now go back to you. I want you to think about yourself and what I'm going to be presenting to you today. And as I go through the things, I want you thinking, okay, what do I think about that? Where am I with that? And so I'm going to present things to you today that are things that I think really matter about leadership. And they're frames of reference that I use and reference all the time in my leadership roles. But really, it's going to come down to, what do you believe about yourself, and what do you believe about your abilities, and what do you believe about what matters and leadership and working with others and building relationships. So let's go to the first screen, where I've got this particular visual for you. So fortunately, I guess, Martha actually picked up on one of my favorite sayings: your leadership is not just about you, at the same time that it is absolutely about you. One of the fundamental things that I believe about leadership, it's paradoxical. If you want to become a successful leader, you have to create the conditions for other people's success. Because you're working with other people. You're working with yourself. And whatever you do to create the conditions for other people's success, because you're not in it alone as a leader, you're in it with others, are going to make a difference in terms of your success. And so when I start thinking about it, I start thinking about, hey, I don't have all the answers. I want to be successful as a leader, but my success depends on what other people do. And so I start with that understanding. So when you're trying to organize something, when Natalie Wood is trying to organize an art festival, and I've tried to chair that before, you got a lot of things to do and you're counting on a lot of other people to come through. So how do you create the conditions for their success is one of those questions that is so important for you to keep in mind, in my judgment. I want to make a distinction now between leadership vision and leadership mindset. Okay, so think with me now a little bit. Leadership vision and leadership mindset. I am talking with you about mental models. Martha talked about mental models too, because she's looked at my materials and know that I really believe in having mental models that you can use to apply to a situation that helps you start thinking about it. Because if they're dependable, they're very, very valuable to help you with your thinking, to get you started and see the similarities of the differences in situations. So a leadership vision to me is how you foresee. It's a foresight kind of thing. We usually think about vision as foresight, but it's also hindsight. So when I say that it's foresight and it's hindsight, and I say to you that mindset is what you believe, what you value, what you hold to be true. Now, what's the relationship between whatever vision you have as a leader and your mindset, what you hold to be true, what matters, why it matters, and how you're going to accomplish whatever it is? That's part of your mindset that you bring to any situation. So give me the whole screen, the people list. All right, now I'm looking at you. I got several people down below that I can't see, but I know they're there. All right, so what's that relationship between foresight, your ability to look toward the future? So leadership's always about the future. It's what you're doing right now to have a better future. You're going to lead. You're going somewhere. But why does hindsight matter as much as foresight as you look at your leadership? Who's willing to give it a whack? What matters about both hindsight and foresight? Who's up? Sarah, where are you?
I'm right here.
There you are, Sarah. Go.
I think your hindsight helps you plan. One of the things that we talk about in math instruction, for instance, is anticipating what the pitfalls are going to be, and then thinking through what your responses to the pitfalls are going to be. And then when you're through, thinking about, okay, when this comes up next time, how am I going to react to it? So it's a process of planning and anticipating and then reacting.
Okay, good start. Christina?
Just to piggyback on that, I was just going to say, yes, it helps you prevent and predict what could go wrong, but also can color things. You could make predictions that are not necessarily going to be accurate. So you've got that perception that may not hold true in the future.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Kristen. Kristen?
Yeah, I would continue to just build on all of these things. It's why we teach history, right? What has happened in the past it has created implicit biases in us that have been reinforced. It has painted and tainted. It's that whole concept of lived experience. We each bring that into every future decision that we're making. And so being able to reflect on the past, that growth mindset is just really critical in my mind for, the type of leader you want to be moving forward.
Mhm. Excellent. Did you look at my garage? What is my garage? Is it hindsight? Is it foresight? Is it both? What is your history? What is your story that you have learned to become the person that you are? That's sitting there with you all the time and is part of your leadership. Because as you look at this, certainly hindsight informs foresight. And that's just what you're saying. You have experienced certain things that work, you've experienced things that didn't work, you've experienced things that you would not make the same choice again. And all that richness is right there if you think about it, if you're aware of it. And so once again, that whole sense of being aware of yourself, and Martha just did a great job of it, talking about it with you. Being aware of herself and knowing herself is a really important part of managing herself and part of her day. It was interesting to me too. How many of you have taken Myers-Briggs? It's one of the indicators. I mean, it's a very popular product. She said she was INTJ. I am ENTJ. And so I am just slightly probably more extroversion, more of an extrovert than she is an introvert. But that notion of trying to learn about yourself over time really helps, because you're getting a different perspective about who you are. And there are lots of ways to do that measure. What is a lighthouse? Thinking metaphorically and making the comparison to our leadership. What does a lighthouse do? What does a lighthouse do? What? I'm not a real nautical.
Up there in the left-hand corner.
Oh, Floyd, what does a lighthouse do?
Lighthouse gives you a point of reference, something to orient yourself.
Mm-hmm. And that point of reference is really important because
it helps you navigate from one place to another.
okay. So that image, that light that you have, that you shine on your world, both your inner world and your outer world, matters to leadership, because it's what you're going to respond from. And so the lighthouse image I like because it helps you navigate your journey in that world. And so the more you understand yourself and the more choices and options you have, the better choices you're going to make as a leader. And so I also have a visual that I use, and let's go to the next visual, Liz, that helps me think about leadership. I first developed it years ago. And the visual, I first did, instead of influence over, influence through, and influence to, I first had power over, power through, and empowering to when I first constructed it. But I try to keep this mental model in mind as I think about what my purpose is as I'm in a leadership role working with other people. Now, I want you to start looking at it with me, realizing that it is not separate a leader, in my opinion, has to do all three of these things. They have to have influence over. If a leader doesn't have influence, they can't lead. Unless they have the authority to just tell people what to do, and they either do it or they don't do it. But influence over means you have the ability at times to say, this is what is going to happen. Even though influence through is so important when we talk about meaningful influence through positive, caring, respectful relationships with others. So important to be positive, care, respect others in your relationships. But there are times when you have to stand up for what you believe is right, even if you don't have power over people, like role power. There are times when you have to say no. No, I can't do that. And influence too, if you really see yourself as in a leadership role as helping other people become who they are capable of becoming, there's a power in that, and it's a fulfilling power. So I'm asking you now, what do you think of that? What does that model do for me and could do for you if you actually embrace that mental model as your responsibilities are a leader, or sometimes to have a leadership mindset that seeks controlling influence over others. Sometimes a leadership mindset that seeks meaningful influence through relationships, and a leadership mindset that seeks fulfilling influence by helping others to grow and become who they're capable of becoming. Now, what I want to do with that then is come back to folks on the screen. Now, so what do you think of that particular model right now? And if you don't use a model like that, or if you have a model that you do as an overlay of leadership, I'd like to hear about it. So Nell Diamond, Nell, you had your hand up.
Yes.
Go for it.
Thank you, Dr. Birch. I guess as I'm looking at this model, in my experience, and I'd love to hear what others think, influence two drives influence through, which would drive influence over. I think by helping others to grow and bringing out their strengths, it develops, the leadership, it comes from the bottom up. So it's just my opinion. I think you can't have number one without 3 and 2 in that order. So,
Okay.
thank you.
And why do you say you can't have it?
Because I think if you're not bringing out the best in other people, are you really being a leader, or are you being an authoritarian?
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a leader brings out the collective, as Martha was mentioning, and you as well, the collective best of everyone to drive a common goal.
And have you known leaders that did see their role as dominating others?
Oh, yes.
without caring about their growth, because they cared more about the accomplishment that needed to take place? In my model, I said leadership accomplishment mindset, because we think accomplishment's important. I mean, if you as a leader don't accomplish what you're supposed to accomplish, you're toast.
You have Lloyd and Kelly out in the corner.
All right, so keep going. Kelly?
Well, when I first looked at this last night, I saw this as almost these three influences over kind of a comprehensive continuum. I look at the leaders that I've seen, and the more mature and the more effective leaders, they tend to kind of had grown across that continuum. They started out really thinking like being the sage on the stage, knowing everything and being much more controlling. But as leaders become more mature and effective, I notice they layer themselves off more and bring people up even more. So like today, this morning, she even said, I just love the fact, it really struck me today in this morning's presentation about how her leadership was making other people look better. It was not about her. And all of a sudden I was like, wow, she's really at number 3. So I think it was kind of like a growth mindset. And to piggyback on what Kristen Aird said earlier, I think when we backwards map our leadership and what we've done in our experiences, if you can use that to grow and change, that's maturity. But if you don't, then it's all for naught. So I don't know.
Good insight. Lloyd, are you up? Did you want to make a comment?
Sure. You know, I think human nature sometimes is to push back against authoritarian, kind of leadership. And if you can really engage with people in a caring way and try to help them grow, it just puts them on your team. You're all on the same team, and there's less of a tendency for people to resist.
You have Alex Lober.
Alex,
Yeah,
Alex, go ahead. But
sure. Yeah, I'm building a little bit on what Nell said around kind of this upside down thinking around number 3 sort of, and number 2 drive number 1, because when I looked at influence over, I was thinking about this notion of hierarchy. And while that can have a negative connotation, I see myself as someone who has put myself in a position of responsibility in order to meet the needs of the whole. So those decisions that have to be made, like you said, Dr. Korach, around like, sometimes you just have to be really decisive, but those decisions have to be driven by the needs of the whole and people that you are serving. And so I had a kind of a similar feeling that Nell shared around that influence over is definitely driven by that collaborative piece and the desire for others to be successful.
anybody else have a perspective? And I'm going to share something with you and then see what you think of this. This isn't easy. Because if you're building relationships with people that are based on trust and caring and respect, you're going to be working with people that if you're in a role that's an authoritarian or authoritative role, you're going to have to make decisions about their well-being and their future. So I have where I can think of one really good example where I counted on a person, had a very good relationship with that person. It was not a teacher, it was not a classified employee, and I fired that person. Now, so what I'm saying is there are times when somebody does something that compromises your integrity that you have to assume the responsibility as a leader. And Martha said this, I don't think about leadership as authority. I think about it as responsibility. I was responsible for the Lake Oswego School District for 27 years. That's the way I thought about it. And everything I can do to make it serve the best interest of the whole, of everybody, that was important. So the question I have for you is, how do you do these things? When, if you look at my visual, when we actually go back to the visual again with what that was. Good. The visual, not the go back one. Okay, look at the eye. Look at the eye. Looking at the world, looking at their leadership and looking at other people. We know after our work together already that what you know and understand, along with your biases, your habits, your beliefs that might be very much in conflict with other people's beliefs, you never have a whole picture. There's going to be fragments, there's going to be gaps in your understanding. And so you're going to have to navigate what you believe to be true, your values that you have anchored your integrity on, in the mix of different people's values and different people's ideas about what's important and valuable. So that's going to put us in the next slide going forward. All right, so here's your challenge. And then you're going to go into your group and do this. What matters most is how you see yourself. I love this little visual of a kitty cat looking at the lion when they look in the mirror. And we're all vulnerable. We are all vulnerable. And nobody has all the answers. Nobody has the pure white light. But what it really comes down to is we can look at something that we would like to be able to accomplish as a leader, but it comes down to how do you do it? How do you actually do it? I like the Goethe quote, treat people as if they were what they ought to be, and you help them to become what they are capable of being. Think about that quote in relation to working with people, and actually think about that quote in relation to yourself. Treat yourself as to what you ought to be, and it will help you to become what you're capable of being. Works for you when you're asking yourself, who am I? And it works for trying to help others become what they're capable of. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to take those three perspectives and go back one. Liz is doing a great job of navigating, fixing me here. I want you to take these three things. I want you to go into your first group. You're going to have about 12 minutes, and I want you to think about, okay, how do you do these things? How do you have influence over people and don't tick them off at the same time? How about influence through building relationships? What do you do to build those relationships? And then influence to what's really important about helping people become who they are capable of. So you're headed into your group. You'll have about 12 minutes, talk to each other, everybody share, and tell me, how do you do these things? You pick any area and talk about how do you do it, okay?
Ready?
Yep.
All right, and you'll get a 2-minute warning. Here we go. There you go. When James and Beth come back, they'll see that they just need to join those rooms.
Okay.
And I think they're probably, will see that they're on. So I'm going to pause the recording.
Recording in progress.
I know they all love hearing that.
Pardon?
The recording in progress.
Mhm,
Yes.
mhm.
Just a few more. Okay, room one, it's should be coming. I think you are everybody there.
Great, super, super, super.
Just a reminder to everyone to hit your mute when you come back in.
Great, thank you for the reminder. All right, we're going to do this as we work together over time in a circular pattern. So we're going to come back to that model and build that model so that it makes sense to you and to allow you to build your own model from that. Because that sense of, okay, what is your purpose as a leader is really important to how you behave, what actions you take at different times. And so let's go to that next visual, Liz, which is the consciousness model. And right here, when you look at the consciousness model,
What's that on there?
I don't know. You
Oh,
want
here.
me to take it out?
Uh,
We can distinguish a perceptual response to reality. And when we talk about perception, we're talking about you see something, you perceive it, and you interpret it immediately. But our perceptual model is an associative awareness. And so when we say associative awareness, we're talking about we take whatever we got going for us in our memory and our experiences, and we make a judgment about what something is. The difference between that and a higher order consciousness, which we're going to call a conceptual metacognitive awareness, your ability to think about your own thinking and realize that your perceptual awareness, if it just stays there and you don't think about your thinking, is going to have you inhabit land and bias land, because a perceptual awareness is not going to factor in right away your biases and your habits that could be getting in the way of what you're trying to accomplish. Unless you make yourself and pause and make yourself more capable of thinking about your thinking to be able to move forward. Usually it happens after the fact if you do that. Now you've been practicing pausing. So what I want is the whole screen of people again. And what do we know about the brain that helps us understand this concept? If you want to think theoretically, imaginatively, creatively, you got to get out of your primary consciousness. You got to move back and forth between your primary consciousness and your higher order conscious abilities. But what do we know about the brain? We talked about it and started with the notion that it's a miracle of associative relationships between what we see and interpret. It's really good at associations, but it's not very good at what? Differentiation. It's good at associating, but it's not good at picking up differences. Does that make sense? You have to decide not just to live with the association of this just like something else. What did I spend way too much time on in the first session? Rat droppings, mouse droppings, and bat droppings. I could not give up the fact that I knew I was working with mice. Those are mice droppings. 2 years. I stayed in that associative and did not ask myself the question, what if it isn't a mouse? Seems odd, but I didn't do it. I've seen people hire because they like this person, or I've seen people recommend to me that we hire a person that looked just like the last person that was in that role. They looked like the person, but they had a very different set of abilities and personality. Now, what else do we know about the brain? What else do we know about what the brain will do automatically for you? What other things did we say? It's cool to have brain. I mean, that's really a good thing. But let's just leave it with your ability to stop and consider your thinking is really important. And to pause and listen, to encourage, to pause and question yourself. Questioning yourself is so important. And that's what we're asking us to continue working on. All right, I'm going to move on to the next slide. And we've already talked about my love affair with the lighthouse metaphor. But you also have a flashlight focus, a floodlight notice. Flashlight is what you're really zeroing in on. And at the top of the page, our brains are capable of exceptional focus. You can really zero in on something, but they are also extraordinarily vulnerable to distraction. And so being able to manage your own focus and think about where you might want to get better at what you're focusing on has some significant value as you look at the abilities that you want to hone as a leader. I will then go to the next one because I want to reach a certain point here where you're going to have another conversation. Let's look at that whole key to purposeful imagination. Now, I'm not talking about imaginative fancy. I'm talking about knowing what you're about and what you want to accomplish, and then being able to imagine things in relation to who you are, what you're capable of as a leader, and what matters about how you behave. And imagining then what's going on around you. That notion of reading the room, kind of a popular metaphor. Your ability to interpret what is going on within you and around you with a degree of accuracy. Now, Marcia said something that I thought was really important. It's important for you to remain open, but she used the word neutral. And openness is neutralness. Because you want to be able to interpret what's going on within you and around you without jumping to conclusion. Make sense? So you can read the context of what's going on. Word choice, body language, tone of voice. Tone of voice actually makes more difference in people's ability to read what someone's attitude is rather than word choice. Tone of voice makes quite a difference. To assess the invisible subtext. In every interaction you have, there's an invisible subtext. What people are feeling, what are their biases, what are their emotions. Sometimes you can see that a person is really emotional. But oftentimes you have no idea what the emotion is in a situation. But your ability to factor that in is also important, and it's an imaginative ability. You don't know, but what does it look like? Do you know? Do you even think about the subtext? Ask yourself what's going on beneath the surface in an interaction that really matters. And then how can you approach the situation to be able to make it as positive a situation as you possibly can. All right, I'm going to give you an example. And ask you to use your imagination to tell me how you would approach this situation. Okay, so give me the people. All right, here's the situation. And we have people in this class that were actually there at the time. Whether they remember or not, that'll be interesting. We had a ritual in the school district in my 27 years, where at the beginning of the year, we all got together and had a large meeting at one of the high school auditoriums. We had the chair of the board speak. We had the Teachers Association president speak. We had the Classified Association, meaning secretaries, custodians, the people that were working to keep the schools open and safe. And then the superintendent spoke, okay? And I always spoke about what the upcoming year looked like. I thanked people for all of their amazing accomplishments. And I gave them a little bit of insight about myself. And usually we laughed at myself if I was successful. And so school board chair did a great positive job. The Teachers Association president, extremely positive, really on her game. And then the classified president for all of our classified employees, which about half of our employees are classified employees, made a very, very strong appeal in her messages that a lot of people didn't see as positive, in part because of the tone of voice, I think, that was a little bit more strident, where she was very clear about talking about what we pay classified employees and how difficult it is to live and take care of a family on what we pay. And this was a year where we were going into negotiations that spring. And so right before I was to speak. Now, so it kind of sucked the air out of the room for a lot of people, because it had always been a positive with the 3 speeches. So if you were me, what would you think about? What would be in your consideration as you're sitting there thinking, okay, what am I going to say to make this as positive as I possibly can? What considerations would you have? What considerations would you have? What's one consideration? Somebody give me a shot.
Well, I think you need to acknowledge what was said.
And very, very on point. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to just go and give your speech like it didn't happen. So you need to acknowledge what was said. How would you acknowledge it? Go ahead, Debbie.
I was going to say that I think you need to acknowledge their concerns and their anxiety about the year coming up, and then use your leadership to talk about ways you're going to address the year.
Okay,
No
and
worries.
excellent suggestion. But I'm still not making the leap. And I have to do exactly what Debbie just said. In my speech, I have to weave that in terms of what she specifically said. But what's a concern that that is the one that I thought I really had to figure out how to work around, because everything that she said was what?
True.
True. Everything she said was true. So buck up, little camper. You're on the stage here pretty quick. So okay. Heather.
I was thinking like, gosh, what courage it was for her to get up and say that, like almost acknowledging like what it took for her, even though she knew it wasn't going to be a popular thing. So.
Yep. Very, very good. She was taking a risk and she knew it. She was there for her people. So you do not wish to diminish that at all. And so how do you make the transition? I can tell you what I said. I said, initially, we don't pay anyone what they're worth. And our classified employees are golden because they keep everything working for all of the people that are trying to teach and address the kids. And she's right. No, what we do try to do and what we can afford to do is that we can keep our classified pay as good or better than anybody else does. And that will be something that we will be sitting down and talking about in our negotiations process, and just acknowledging that she's right. And that will be one of our challenges as we try to figure out how to move forward with the money that we have. But what I'm trying to use this as an example for, you're going to be in situations where you need to ground yourself with what really matters to you, and getting your integrity and your sense of relationship, so that you don't blow the relationship part of the dynamic. So let's do one more thing, and I'm going to ask you to turn to the last visual. And let's take a look at the last visual on my PowerPoint. Okay. So we're going to go back into our groups. And if you were to set out to create a similar mosaic of images, posters, meaningful objects to speak to you of the choices, challenges, role models, successes, regrets in your life, what would you put on your wall? What's one thing that you would put on your wall that would still speak to you about who you are and what you have been influenced by as you become more introspective about thinking about yourself? Because one of the things that we need to do with our time together is have you thinking about what has helped shape you. Everything on those walls, for one reason or another, speaks to me about events, about important things that I did right or I did wrong. And there's a picture of me as a 26-year-old high school administrator. And I have learned a great deal from my mishaps and the experiences that I have had. And so I'm asking you to just share with the group one thing that you would have on your walls because it matters to you and it still matters to you. And we're going to go into groups and do that as our final 10 minutes together before Christopher's going to take over and wrap up our session. Okay, you got 10 minutes. Talk to each other. Share.
Recording in progress.
Other things.
You do know you can all wait until it flies you back with it. Oh, here they go. Everybody's flying in. All right, we're turning it over to Christopher Boyer. Let me.
Well, thank you so much. And let's just all give a big round of applause to Bill for his presentation today. Very nicely done. Thank you. What we'd like to do, what we did last time when we were in person is we had our small breakout groups and we talked about what it is you were taking away from that day's class. We'd like to do the same thing today, but we'd like to do it in this group format where you quickly let us know something of significance, something that shifted your perspective, something that you want to make yours as you walk away from today's session. And we do have a number of people to get through, so I'm going to call on people. Thank you for your contribution, and I'll move on to the next one. So you'll need to be ready with your mute button, able to take yourself off mute. And before I start just going across my screen, it's possible that we'll end up going a tiny bit over, depending upon how long it takes to get through. So if there's anybody that has a time constraint that's going to need to cut off early, will you raise your hand, and that will bring you to the front of my screen, and we'll make certain we call on anybody who might have to leave first to make sure you get a chance. Of course, you could not do that and just be gone at the end, but we'd really prefer to hear from you. So anybody have a time constraint that needs to speak up first? I don't see anybody raising their hand, so I'll just go across my screen and I will start with Jen Peterson. Quick takeaway for you today, Jen.
Well, I didn't think I was going to go first, so I wasn't that ready to unmute. You also got me because I have a system here and I like to hear other people's stuff first. The thing that I took a lot of notes. I liked the part that how you help other people work together to reach a shared goal. That was one of the things I wrote down from when Martha spoke. And that the fundamental job of a leader is to care about others and their success. And that really resonated with me. I liked that. One thing that came up in our small group, I don't want to steal anyone's thunder if that's might be what they want to talk about, but of the different leader methods, one of the things was, what if you think something of someone else and what you think they could become, but that's not their desire? How do you balance that? So that's it.
Great. Thank you so much, Jen. I'm going to call on Kelly next, and James, you'll be on deck.
Oh, great. Mine actually piggybacked. I was in Jen's breakout group, but leadership starts with relationships. And I love that quote about don't make a friend after the fact you need him. We need to establish those before you need those relationships, and not just necessarily need them, but be able to lead somebody else, and just being able to read the room. Like Dr. Korich said, you have to read the room, and relationships are different for each person, and you need to really listen carefully to evaluate what they need and not what you want for them.
Absolutely.
Intuitiveness.
Thank you, Kelly. James and Carrie will check on you next. If your microphone still doesn't work, just go ahead and type your comment below.
I think it works.
Oh, great. James?
Yeah, one of the things I was thinking about is, from Martha's talk about her percentage rule, she had a 10, 30, 30, 30, and I don't think in my role, it falls under those percentages, but I'm kind of curious to develop some sort of a rule for my particular role. So just kind of interesting, and that could help guide some of my decision-making based on that rule or that mental model.
Great. Thank you, James. Carrie? Christina, you'll be next.
This has been the most provocative session. And I'm still exploring in my mind the concept of management versus leadership versus coaching. And I think that there can be a pitfall of thinking of leadership as coaxing someone to think as you do, or to follow your model, or to fit into your paradigm. And I think there's danger there, that leadership is more about helping others to become the best they can be at what they want to be, recognizing that not everyone fits into the same slot, that we all have different skill sets. And I think not to be judgmental or say you would make a perfect such and such if you would just change your ways. That's dangerous. And I'm just thinking more about leadership as helping people become the best of who they are.
Yes. Thank you, Carrie. Appreciate that. Christina, we'll have you followed by Crystal Lee.
I think I was along Carrie's line of thinking. The piece that I wrote down that stood out the most was that the fundamental job of a leader is to care about others and their success more than your own. And when I look back to some of the most influential people in my life, I would say that was certainly true of them. So I hope that I'm carrying that forward, because I think leadership really is about a community, right? It's empowering a community, and that is the only way to do it. So.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Christina. Crystal Lee, we'll have you followed by Alex Lober.
There's a lot today. There's a lot to digest. But I think the thing that I'm going to focus on and digest first, or try to digest first, is the mental model. And I think managing up, that's something really that I'm going to drill into, because I think that's something maybe I haven't really put a lot of effort or thought into before.
Thank you. Alex, we'll have you followed by Julie.
Sure. I believe one of the quotes I heard today from either Martha or Dr. Korach was creating conditions of other people's success. And to me, that links to the idea of empowerment of the folks that I'm leading, because we are all in this together, and none of us can do this work in isolation. And so how am I facilitating that? How am I drawing on the strengths of others to help them feel like they can do the job, even if I'm not right there next to them?
Thank you, Alex. Julie, we'll have you followed by Lloyd.
Thank you. The Goethe quote really stood out for me for its first part, the treat people as if they were what they ought to be, and you help them become what they are capable of being. And I reflected on the people who have helped me grow, and I realized that they were always treating me as the person that they had the vision of what I could be, and they treated me that way. And in that way, I began to see myself that way.
Absolutely. Thank you, Julie. Lloyd, we'll have you followed by Chris.
Well, I really appreciated the 10, 30, 30, 30 kind of mindset comment. And I was going to make the same comment that Julie did about the quote of treating people as if they were what they ought to be, and you'll help them become that. I think that's something that I'll take away and try to work with.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lloyd. Chris, we'll have you followed by Ryan Reg.
Okay, yeah, I agree with Martha's comment regarding the 10, 30, 30, 30, but for me, it's the managing self-awareness, knowing your own values, the integrity, and then managing your stress. I'm really going to give those items a lot of thought in being a leader.
Thank you, Chris. Ryan, we'll have you followed by Jamie.
I really enjoyed everything today. I always enjoy hearing Martha speak, and I really like the leaders create a condition for the success of others, and the kind of the addition to that was clearing obstacles and providing resources, because I think that ties into that really well. I really liked our breakout session. It was cool to see that all of us have the same kind of things that inspire us or things we look back on, and a lot of it was pictures and travel and those relationships we had with people or have with people. So yeah, it was really cool.
Thank you, Ryan. Jamie, we'll have you followed by Kelly.
Hey, yeah, I thought there's so many great points. I've got pages of notes. A lot of them have already been said, but one thing I did pick up on was Bill's model when he was talking about influence and how he had switched the word power over from influence. It harkened back to, I think, the first session as well, and also showed how ideas adapt over time, even when someone knows the subject matter so well, they can still evolve, which I thought was pretty cool.
Thank you, Jamie. Kelly, we'll have you followed by Heather.
Well,
Sorry.
Is it Kelly Bird? You already went, Kelly, right?
Yeah, I'm done. Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. I appreciate our small groups, and someone mentioned about doing vision boards, and I think that's a really powerful tool. Like the garage was filled with all the pics. I think I want to do that. Who do I want to be, and put those images around so I can become that.
Thank you, Kelly. Heather, we'll have you followed by Joy.
Which Heather do you mean? Sorry.
Heather Graves Ramsey.
Okay. I love the small breakouts as well, and just being able to have, and different from Ryan's group, we all had a lot of different images, and so I had image envy, but just really kind of thinking of the different things that could be inspiring us from this past, our current, and our future, and really then also for me focusing more of a flashlight on future, and what that looks like for me now, but incorporating those others. So.
Thank you, Heather. Joy, we'll have you followed by Natalie Wood.
Yes, I really liked our small group because we talked about what we saw that a leader could do in a group that would make a difference. And we all kind of came up with seeing people's strengths and piggybacking on those, or helping them see their strengths and kind of shifting things towards that direction. But the one thing I think I'm going to remember is when Dr. Korich talked about his speech or talk down in the first day of school, whenever they do it, how there was something that was uncomfortable and how he handled that being the next speaker. Because I have been in groups or organizations where something happens and everybody there knows the elephants in the living room, but it's never acknowledged. So it kind of makes the rest of the meeting be uncomfortable. So I think I'll remember that when a situation comes up, that it's something that's just thrown on us. And then when we don't act like we heard it or acknowledged it, it doesn't help anybody. So that's what I think I'll remember.
Thank you, Joy. Natalie, we'll have you followed by Amy.
Thank you. Kind of back to what Kelly Bird was saying about the visuals and Dr. Koresh's garage, just having that opportunity for a visual daily cue of like self-introspection. And it also kind of goes back to what Martha talked about. When you have reminders of what is so important to you on a daily, it helps you with keep your integrity up, because you have a visual reminder every day. This is why I'm doing the thing that I'm doing.
Thank you, Natalie. Amy, we'll have you followed by Anthony.
Thanks. One of the things our small group talked about was not only the 10-30-30, but within the 10, the opportunity to use the pause strategy that we had talked about last time. And really the merging of those two was really helpful in our thinking.
Excellent. Anthony, we'll have you followed by Christine.
Yeah, so I also took a lot from the example Dr. Korych used about his beginning of the school year speech. I like how he really broke that down in terms of what was going through his head, and then he asked for, input from folks in the class. And then the other thing is, I wrote down like real life examples next to each leadership mindset model that's mentioned in the material, and that really helps me kind of put it into perspective of how these different mindsets work in real life situations. So I used sales on the influence over, I used social services and adult community center where I am for the second example of influence through. And then I use coaching and mentorship for influence too. And when I think about those roles, it helps me put the material like into perspective of something that I can relate to more so than reading about, how the brain might take in a certain situation in terms of, your abilities to soak in information and how that affects your personality. So yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Anthony. Christine, we'll have you followed by Curtis.
Yeah, let's see. I'm trying to think of something that people haven't touched on yet, because I agree with most of what's being said here. I'm going to say when Martha boiled it down to percentages that she's actually in contact with those that she's supervising, it's striking to me that it's a real tangible example or demonstration of how you just have to trust and empower the people you're supervising to make their decisions. They're there for a reason, and you have to not try to step in and constantly micromanage, because then you're not doing your job, you're trying to do their job. So I'm gonna remember that. And also Dr. Korich's last slide, we didn't get to spend a lot of time on that, but I want to think about the imaginative introspection awareness model as well and share that with those that I'm working with. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Curtis, we'll have you followed by Debbie.
I was really struck by Martha's talking about that deep listening and how important that was, and her little tool of asking why 5 times. I feel like I'm pretty good at asking why people or individuals or issues. I'm usually even pretty good at asking why twice, maybe 3 times on the rare occasion, but man, how much would a person feel like I've invested into understanding them, and how much better would I understand a particular issue if I ask a 4th and then a 5th time as well. I just thought that was a pretty cool tool that she gave to us.
Thank you, Curtis. Debbie, we're going to have you followed by Ami.
I would say I took Martha's comment about integrity and values probably to heart the most. I think the part where she said, what are the things that matter so much to you that you're willing to, rethink your career, whatever, because they are so deeply held beliefs for you. And I'm thinking back between my experiences and the things that really matter to me. And I find that I lead best when I lead with my values and the things that matter most to me. And I'm not just trying to please somebody else or do what I think everybody wants me to do. And I like to do that. And I think that that's something that I want to keep in mind going forward. And I want to get the rest of my organization to also have that feeling when they come to work that, we're mission based and we're doing this out of values. And I think when we do that, we do our very best work. And that's kind of what I want to get back to.
Thank you, Debbie. Ami, we'll have you followed by Nell.
This was a really small piece of what was said today, but it just stuck with me that tone of voice is more important than word choice.
I've always been raised in a way where the words you say matter, and that's how I'm raising my children, but I've never really given a lot of thought to how tone of voice can make a bigger impact potentially, or an equally big impact. So I really took away that point and I'm going to try to incorporate that going forward, and we'll see what happens.
Thank you so much. Can we have, can I ask you to pause for a moment now, because Kirsten has to leave, and we'll jump to Kirsten.
So sorry. In addition to what has been said, what stood out to me was something Martha just touched on in the littlest amount of time, but I think is really important. And that is, we don't spend enough time when we bring groups together and we're trying to work on influence or power, celebrating and acknowledging all that we do have in common, and really thinking about, from a leader's perspective, that strength-based concept and how we elevate and replicate strengths versus always looking to solve problems.
Thank you, Kirsten. We'll head over to Mel and go to Lisa afterward.
Thank you, Chris. So a lot of this has been said, but I just wanted to touch on that so much of the two presentations were complementary, meaning that, you know, Martha talked about the 10-30-30, but also within that, managing yourself, being self-aware, knowing your values, and managing stress. And then Dr. Korech talked more about situational awareness and how that works within our worldview and how to stay open-minded. And I guess my main takeaways was when Martha was saying that leadership is a responsibility. And I'm going to keep that for myself as a, you know, I never really thought about it that way consciously, is that it's a responsibility. So I really enjoyed these sessions, especially the breakouts.
Thank you, Nell. Lisa, we're going to have you followed by Crystal.
So the most impactful thing today was, for me, in our breakout, when there was one member that talked about an experience that he saw through, and I'm just interpreting what he said, and he obviously would say it best, but my takeaway was that there was an attorney that he followed in his career, and the attorney had very difficult case of child abuse with priests, and in the beginning of his career with these types of cases, he was enraged, and that was his tone, and the way he dealt with these priests as just horrible individuals. And later in his career, as he was working on these cases, he started using a tone and connecting with them as people that had made a horrible mistake, but they were still people. And that with that shift in his mindset and the way he was dealing with these priests, he was able to get huge breakthroughs of confessions and much more evidence than he was able to initially in his career prosecuting these priests of child abuse. So I don't know the facts, but the takeaway for me was the connection to finding that common ground, of even if it's just the human common ground, and the breakthroughs that can come from that.
Thank you, Lisa. Crystal, we'll have you followed by Sarah.
Good afternoon, everyone. I will have to run right after I share, so thank you. So what spoke to me most was treat others as they ought to be treated, and they will become. I grew up with a mindset, or just being told the message, treat others how you want to be treated. And so I'm interested to see how that shifts my interactions with people as I act less from the heart and maybe more from a practical sense. Of course, without trying to use too much of my brain bias. So thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. Sarah, we'll have you followed by Malcolm.
So one of the things, as everybody's been speaking, I've been writing it all down. So just if you need notes on that. I think all the takeaways that people are having are very similar to what I'm taking away, but I had two thoughts, and one was the gift of this 2.5 hours, which I'll admit, it feels sometimes like, oh, come on, I've got things to do. As a pause for me to reflect on these things was, I think that's a leadership move for me to actually pause and take the session seriously and listen to the wonderful things people said in the small group, and the large group, and Martha and Dr. Korach. That was worthwhile. And then the big thing, and I think this is what Kirsten Aird was saying before she left, is I wrote down, we don't stay enough in the places where we agree. And I was thinking about all the politics and the this and the that. There's so much that we do agree on. And I wonder about starting from there more often versus let's get the pros and cons out here. So that's something I'm going to experiment with.
Thank you, Sarah. Malcolm, we'll have you followed by Heather Welker.
Yeah, I was doing some pre-work on this, and I was with the influence of over, through, and to, and I was trying to figure out where I lie and what I was supposed to be doing. And then I think after today, knowing that all three are important really stood out in my mind. And I liked how it connected from the first session and doing some pausing and question yourself before acting.
Thank you, Malcolm. Heather, we'll have you followed by Nicolette.
So something I realized was about the quote, and I know a couple other people brought it up about how you ought to be and treat that way, is I realized I don't like to badmouth anything. We have new owners, old owners, things like that. So I realized the folks I'm working with now have a vision for me and they're invested in me. And I feel that, and I didn't realize I didn't have it before. And I realized I haven't had that in my professional life before. So it's really important that I feel that. And now I've been feeling like I have that bigger worth in myself. And so it really has made me think, reading that quote the other day as well, was I feel like, and it's that self-reflection, I feel like I do that for my employees, but really I want to look back and make sure I am, because I know it's made a big difference for me and how I perform. The other thing I liked was what Anthony had shared, that he wrote down the real life examples next to the mindsets, and I want to go through my life and write down my real life examples. I can go through with those as well a little bit deeper.
Thank you, Heather. Nicolette, we're going to have you followed by Beth.
So to follow Heather about that quote about, supporting people who they ought to be, and kind of thinking about how sometimes in positions where, helping to support people, but then having the boundary to realize, do I want this more than you do? And learning how to kind of step back from that and not be so attached to that. But then also that aspect of, am I doing what I ought to do to support myself? Because I think sometimes we tend to focus outside of ourselves as opposed to within. So that's my takeaway.
All right. Thank you so much, Nicolette. Is Beth on? If you're on, we'll hear from you. And if not, I will ask, did I miss anyone? Because some people popped in and out of my screen. I did my best to go back and forth. Paul Van Roon, there you are. We didn't call on you. Paul, would you like to say something?
I'd be happy to. I thought both presentations were outstanding, and I think the comments have been great. My key takeaways, though, were self-reflection, understanding the concepts and understanding when to use them, adaptability and flexibility, and then the humanity component, recognizing that we work with people and approaching them in a sensitive and meaningful way. And there's also a quote that I like, and I think it relates to today, and that is, A leader doesn't become great because they have power. They become great because they have the ability to empower others.
Thank you so much, Paul. All right, one last chance. Did I miss anybody? All right, if I did not miss anybody, I just want to thank everybody for staying on and listening to your classmates' insights. It was great having you today for the October Leadership Lake Oswego session. Please do reach out to your partners. And again, if you have any feedback for Liz, Dr. Korash, or I, please reach out to us as well. I am very sincere in my desire to have coffee with everybody. I've already had a couple. So if you'd like to reach out to me, I think you have everybody's contact information. Love to chat with you before next month or over the next year. Take good care of yourselves. And I'm just going to ask our leadership team to stay on the line so we can discuss how we can improve for next time. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you,
Bye.
everybody. Bye.
Thank you.